Happy Thursday, everybody. This is Mellissa Thomas with FNN News TV. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this Thursday's edition of the FNN Politics and Power Series. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure coming to you guys with all of the politics, all of the different pieces of information that can educate you guys on the political process, particularly if you're someone who either you've been busy with life and you don't necessarily care, but now's about the time for you to get engaged, or if you've always been politically engaged and just want to stay up to date with everything that's been going on, particularly this year since this is a midterm election year. And getting right into it, we'll be interviewing today Tom Keene, who is the Democratic candidate for Florida House District 35. Just a little bit about Tom. He is a military veteran, specifically a Navy veteran. So that resonates with me because I'm a Navy veteran as well. So huge shout out to him for that. His campaign website provides a little bit more information for you guys. He's a 21-year military veteran, and he has maintained his commitment to public service. Right now, he is a successful businessman in the high-tech aerospace training and simulation industry. He is a committed progressive who is running to serve Orange and Osceola counties as the next state representative for Florida House District 35. Now, for those of you who may not know, in terms of the newly redrawn maps here in the state of Florida, House District 35 is huge. It encompasses Orange and Osceola counties, and we'll get into that conversation in terms of those details with Tom right here momentarily. So let's, without further ado, bring him on in. Tom, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Mellissa. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate you. So first, let's talk about that, essentially, because I did notice on your campaign Facebook page, I love that you actually dropped the population for House District 35, which is like 180,000 people.
Right.
So kind of let folks know what the different areas that House District 35 includes.
Sure. Well, we'll start at the Florida House. In Florida, we have 120 state representatives, and each district is, in theory, supposed to be the same population. So that's where they start when they do the redistricting. So we're at 180,000 after the census was done a year ago. So the district's grown a little bit. And when the state legislature goes to redraw the maps to make sure that each district has those 180,000, that's where you see the maps getting redrawn. And so the map this year is Orange County and Osceola County. We have about 80% of the voters live in Orange County and about 20% live in Osceola County. And for those viewers that don't know, Orange County is basically the home for Disney World and Universal Studios and SeaWorld. So we're the tourist destination for most of the country. Orange County, like I said, has got most of the population, and Osceola County has a big agriculture and ranching community, so there are a lot of cows that are in Osceola County.
Right, wide open spaces.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so talk to our audience about what made you decide to run for House District 35.
Well, as you mentioned at the top of your show, I'm a military veteran. I served 20 years as a naval officer, and service is in my blood, if you will. So I wanted to continue to serve. I want to serve the folks here in Orange and Osceola County and Tallahassee. I think that over the last several years, we've had some issues that I don't agree with, and I think most of the voters in District 35 don't agree with either. So we want to make sure that we represent those folks in Tallahassee.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate that. So just kind of on the topic of maps, obviously there was the maps for the legislature, the state of Florida, but also I wanted to get your thoughts on the governor's congressional maps, because obviously the Florida legislature, both chambers, they submitted theirs, the one that they mutually agreed on. The governor vetoed it and drew his own congressional maps.
Sure.
So I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Sure. So there's a little bit of a difference in the way that they draw maps. So for the state house and the state senate, the senate draws their map and the house draws their map, and then they come together for a joint resolution and they approve both those maps. And those maps for the state house and the state senate are forwarded to the state Supreme Court for approval. And that happened pretty much without any feedback or any blowback. So that happened, and that's been approved. So there's no linkage, if you will, between the state legislature and the federal, the congressional maps. So now the same process was basically used to draw up the congressional maps, but instead of going to the state Supreme Court for approval, it went to Governor DeSantis. And at that point, DeSantis vetoed the first bill, and the special session was called to redraw the map. And then he provided a map that was then presented and voted on. And that was the map that he then signed into law. And that's the controversy there is, in my opinion, is it disenfranchises voters in several districts. And that is basically goes against what the Florida Constitution said. Now, I'm not an attorney, so I can't comment on that part of it, but clearly it's gerrymandering at its worst. But we're stuck with it. It is what it's going to be. So this next election, it looks like to me, again, not being an attorney and know how these things work, that we'll go forward with those maps. Now, we did gain a congressional seat this year, so we actually have one additional seat, and that seat actually wasn't even one of the controversial places. So it's just kind of crazy. So we see here in Orlando, for example, that one of the districts that is controversial is one that was on the west side of Orlando and now goes all the way through the center of Orlando, east to west, and it changes the demographics of the district pretty well. So that is what it is. So
got you, and thank you for sharing that. So we talked a little bit right before we came on, and we were talking about some of the common pain points that you've heard from folks as you've been knocking on doors throughout District 35. Sure. So kind of share that with our audience. What have been the common pain points that you've heard?
Well, a lot of the folks that we've talked to, the economy seems to be at the top of their list. When we knock on a door and we say I'm running for the state legislature, of course they don't really have any real understanding who their current state rep is. So hopefully we try to educate them on that and make sure that they understand how important the state legislator is to their everyday lives. The things that I have heard from voters have principally been economic, and things like this homeowners insurance has been on the top of the list. That's probably been the number one topic that I've heard. Other things I've heard are, just inflation, cost of fuel, and things like that. And I try to tell them that, the state legislature did pass a law to give them the 25-cent tax holiday, but sadly, Republicans pushed that to the October-November timeframe instead of providing that for them right now. So we're pushing that off. It's almost, I hate to use the word bribe, but it's almost like a bribe for voters. On the homeowners insurance, that's something that hits folks really hard. And again, we saw foot dragging and not a lot of action that was taken during the regular session. So we have to call everybody back, increase costs to taxpayers. And I'm not sure, some action was taken that will give some small amount of relief, but I don't know that relief will come this year or next year in the pocketbooks of homeowners. We probably need to go back again in January and tweak it again. It's hard work, and it seems like this is the type of work that my friends in the Republican side don't really want to do. They would rather worry about culture issues as opposed to getting real work done, which impacts everyday Floridians.
And just as a follow-up to that, how has it personally impacted you in terms of the homeowners insurance rates, like once they went up? How have you been?
Yeah, so the biggest impact I think has been to homeowners that have older homes that their roofs are over 10 or 15 years old. That's the number one problem. So right now, I've seen my insurance rates go up incrementally every year. Not to the point where it's doubled or tripled like it has in some areas. And I haven't lost my insurance. The insurance that I have, I got through the military. I won't say the company name, but they've been with me for 20, 25 years, and I've been very happy with the service I've received from them. But not everybody has access to that type of insurance. or that company. And so clearly, when I talk to voters and they say, well, they lost their insurance last year and they've had a struggle to try to be reinsured, obviously that's a problem. You have to insure your home. You cannot leave it uninsured. It's your single biggest investment for most people. And you don't want, and obviously we're in the hurricane alley here.
Yes.
And we have a lot of, I call it an alley, but that's tornado alley, but we do have a lot of natural disasters that come through, let alone just a regular fire or other disaster that could strike at your home. So we need to make sure folks are insured and that they are protecting their investment.
Absolutely, and thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. So we're heading into a commercial break very quickly, but before we head into the break, give folks just a brief rundown of your campaign priorities, and then once we come back from the commercial break, then we'll really flesh those out.
Right. So there's so many things that we could talk about, but I'm focused right now on healthcare, schools, and the environment. So on healthcare, we want to make sure that all Floridians are covered by insurance, health insurance. On the environment, we want to make sure that our water is clean. And believe it or not, we have issues here in Florida with clean water. You wouldn't think it with all the rain we have, but with all of the growth and building boom that we've had, we have some problems making sure that residents have clean water to drink. And then on our schools, which is probably the largest issue that the state legislature should be focused on, we're 48th or 49th in the nation in terms of teacher pay. I mean, that's just kind of crazy. We want to lead the nation, not follow the nation. We want our students to be the best and the brightest. And that's going to lead to better jobs. It's going to lead to a better economy. And yet we're dragging our feet. So those are the three priorities: healthcare, environment, and schools.
Awesome. And stay tuned, everybody, because we're going to get into those in a lot more detail when we come back from the break. Stay tuned.
The Florida Lottery is proud to support education by contributing billions of dollars to Florida schools and awarding countless Bright Future scholarships so Florida students can do more than just dream of a brighter future. They can create one. Learn more at flalottery.com.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the FNN Politics Power Series. We are here with Tom Keene, who's a Democratic candidate for Florida House District 35. So just right before the break, we talked about your three campaign priorities. So going back to the public schools one, I wanted to definitely touch on that. Let's flesh that out a little bit, because Florida, especially Governor Ron DeSantis, has been very big on school choice. So I wanted to get your thoughts on what can be done in terms of like the public school systems, because obviously the attention has kind of shifted to more so charter schools and private schools. So for regular public schools in the Osceola and Orange County public school systems, like what would be your vision for those school systems?
Well, I want to make sure that they're funded. And that's the principal thing right there. Let's make sure that they're funded to the full extent that they should be. And we're diverting money for charter schools. Now, charter schools certainly have a place in the Florida education system. And as was originally developed, the idea to offer these alternatives so that we could get lessons learned and try new things made a lot of sense. But the metrics, the evaluation has proven that hasn't been the case. So the results aren't being provided back. So what we're doing is we're robbing public schools to pay for charter and private school tuition. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of it's not a good choice right now, I don't think. So we need to plus up the education budget. We need to make sure that our teachers are respected, and that we let local school boards regulate and make sure that their students are taken care of. So we saw in the past, we had a special session where the governor and the legislators decided that they knew better than the local leaders on the ground and boards of education. And we saw, for example, the Orange County public school system being punished for decisions that the school board made. Mm-hmm. Actually, I think 10 or 12 of the largest school districts in the state were all punished because they took a stand for basically over half of the students that attend school in Florida belong to one of those 12 districts. And that's just, it doesn't make sense to me. I don't know why the governor did that. Well, it's politics is what it is. And it's a sad commentary on where we're at. So we need to make sure that we fund public schools, that we pay our teachers, so we respect our teachers, and that we provide the best students for the workforce and to go on to university or trade school or whatever they decide to do, as opposed to diverting funds. It's kind of a race to the bottom is what we're trying to do. We talk at one hand about how great teachers are, and on the other hand, we're saying things about them that are just heinous. So I want to make sure our public school teachers are respected. And by the way, it's not just the school teachers, it's also the custodians, the food servers, the bus drivers, and the support staff that are at our schools as well. Without them, we wouldn't have good schools either. So it's important that it's the whole ecosystem, if you will. So from the time that your children are picked up at the school bus stop by a school bus driver, prior to them getting to school, the custodians are cleaning the school, making sure it's safe and germ free. And then during the school, obviously teachers, counselors, and support staff. So we need to make sure that the whole system is supported.
And also on the topic of schools, I would be remiss to not get your thoughts on the Uvalde school shooting. So just kind of, give your thoughts on how that was handled, what could have been done differently, and what should be done differently going forward.
Right. So hard topic for me to discuss. I mean, it was a terrible tragedy, but we say that year after year after year. So we had 2 mass shootings here, and we've had more, but the two that have made the press, the Parkland school, and then the Pulse shooting, both big tragedies that we need to talk about. Now, Florida did take some action. We increased the age of purchase for weapons from 18 to 21, which is something that Texas doesn't have. And we implemented some red flag laws here. So I think both of those were a good first step, and I want to make sure that that we don't slide back and we take those things away. Those are 2 very important things that we need to do. I think we fell short on background checks and some other things, but at least Florida, I think in this case, might be actually leading the nation. I've heard some rumblings out of Tallahassee that the governor wants to implement open carry. And I'm opposed to that. In fact, I would like to go the opposite way. I'd like to increase training to get your concealed weapon permit from the minimum 4 hours to maybe 8 or 10 hours, and then have to be retrained at least every other year, so that we don't have other issues with handguns, for example. So, but having said that, Florida, I mean, I don't know that we're not going to have another shooting in Florida. And I couldn't predict when that would be, but I can't imagine that we've solved any problems to date and that we're going to see it again. Hopefully not soon, but sadly it probably will be.
Unfortunately. And yeah, thank you for mentioning Pulse, because of course for our viewers, just as a reminder, the anniversary for the Pulse shooting is coming up on June 12th. So stay tuned here at Florida National News. We'll be covering that anniversary ceremony as well at the Pulse nightclub. So, and thank you for giving your thoughts on kind of the things that you feel would be necessary going forward. Just a small follow up on that. What are your thoughts on the gun owners that are perhaps not the children? Because there's sometimes when the shooter is someone who lives in a household. The shooter is not necessarily themselves a gun owner, but maybe the parents.
Right.
And sometimes they have ready access to the guns there. You mentioned something about having the gun owners maybe go through some training, but do you feel there's some training that would be necessary for gun owners who may have children in their homes that have the ready access to the guns if they're not careful?
sadly, we just had an incident here in the Central Florida area where we had a two-year-old get access to a handgun and fatally shoot one of the child's parents. So no weapon should be accessible to children in a home. So we have to have safe storage, secure storage at all homes that have firearms. I think that should be mandatory, and those gun owners should be held responsible if something like that happens. So in this case, sadly, the father was killed. Can't hold him responsible, but it breaks my heart to think about that, and that the child growing up without a parent. So I would recommend or propose that safe and secure storage is mandatory if you're going to have firearms in the home. You know, in the military, we put our weapons in an armory when we're not using them. So I don't know why here in Florida we can't have that same kind of mentality. Make sure things are locked up and that children cannot access firearms, period.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, one of the other things that comes to mind too, like for those of us who got our gun qualifications, is you never put your finger in the trigger area unless you plan to actually kill somebody. Like, it is not something that you play with. But yeah, definitely wanted to, get your thoughts on that. So much appreciated. We're going to go to another quick commercial break, guys. And we're going to continue the conversation on Tom's top 3 campaign priorities. So the first one we just covered, which is schools. We're going to get into the other 2, which are the environment, and give that other one again. the
Schools, environment, and healthcare.
Healthcare, affordable healthcare. Yeah. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back after this brief break.
We wanted to move back home to be closer to his family. We decided to go with pods because things were stressful enough.
We weren't sure how long we were going to need storage for, so we needed something that was flexible, and then they can deliver the container to wherever we move to.
We haven't found the perfect house yet, but we're still looking.
Welcome back, guys, to the FNN Politics and Power Series. We are back with Tom Keene, the Democratic candidate for Florida House District 35, and continuing that conversation. Let's start with the affordable healthcare conversation.
Sure.
Obviously, this is an ongoing conversation for Florida constituents, and even going as far back as Governor Scott's time period. A lot of folks are still a bit frustrated with the fact that the state has not done the Medicaid expansion. But just wanted to find out what your proposed solutions are in terms of affordable healthcare.
Well, and it's not a simple issue, but there are a couple simple things that we could do immediately, right? Mm-hmm. And that Medicaid expansion would be the first thing. So for the viewers that don't know, today, if you make below a minimum amount of money, if you're in poverty, et cetera, you can get access to Medicaid, mm-hmm. right? Or if you have a low-paying job and you meet a certain threshold, you can get into the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and get a subsidy to be able to afford healthcare. So, for example, my daughter, who works at Disney, she has a plan that's about $300 a month. Mm-hmm. But of that $300, she has to pay herself out of pocket about $150 a month. So that would be the affordable healthcare side of it. However, having said that, there are about 800,000 Floridians that don't have any healthcare at all. They're kind of stuck in between Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. And so we need to make sure that those folks are covered. And that's what Medicaid expansion would do. And those federal dollars would come into Florida. We're only one of, I don't want to say a dozen states now that don't accept those extra dollars for Medicaid expansion. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Even if you think about it, if you're a taxpayer here in Florida, our tax dollars going to the federal government are going to other states to pay for their health care, but we have Floridians here that aren't covered. Makes no sense to me at all. So we need to make sure that's step one right there. Just let's get that taken care of. There are other things that we can be doing along the edges of that to make sure that we're making Floridians healthy and safe. So let's do number one though. Let's get that Medicaid expansion taken care of.
Awesome. And the third priority is, of course, the environment. So I wanted to, you mentioned it very briefly before that first commercial break. Talk to us about why you're so passionate about the environment, what you feel is the impact in terms of Floridians, particularly House District 35.
Right. So environment's a huge issue, and we could start at the very top and talk about climate change and some of the issues that we're going to have here in Florida. I mean, just look at the geography. I mean, from, all of our beaches and the reason people want to come to visit Florida are those beaches, the tourist industry, et cetera. Climate change needs to be taken seriously by the state. And in previous administration, it wasn't. They couldn't even use the word climate change. So we need to address that full on. And then we need to be looking at things as simple as potable water, clean water. As we build more and more houses, we're taking more and more water out of the aquifer. Now, people think that we don't have a water problem here in Florida, but we do. We have a shortage, if you can believe that, of the water coming through the aquifer that then feeds or drives the water coming to your home. So we need to make sure that we're doing all the right things with respect to clean water, and then making sure that we treat it on the way out, and that we're putting it back cleaner than we took it out, if that makes any sense. So those are the two priorities I think that we need to address. But there's so many things that come out of the environment. We live in a solar state. We live in the sunshine state, right? And yet we have issues with getting solar power to residential homes. Power companies consistently try to lobby the legislature to take away the benefits that nature gives us. And again, there's probably 15 or 20 different things we could talk about specifically, but solar power is clearly one of would be one of my top priorities, to making sure that we protect residents' ability to get access to. And it doesn't make any sense when we live in the sunshine state that we can't have ready access to solar power.
Yeah, there was a recent bill as it related to net metering, and apparently
it was vetoed by the governor.
Right.
Rightly so. It should have been vetoed, and I think he did the right thing there by vetoing that bill. But the legislature did the wrong thing. They absolutely shouldn't have even passed that bill. In fact, they should have gone the other way. They should give homeowners incentives to put solar power on their home, as opposed to taking away benefits that come to them. And they use some really very lame arguments, in my opinion. But the governor did see that, and he did veto it. And then there was another big veto that he did recently within the last week, and that was on the environmental bill for the Everglades. And that was another controversial bill that probably, again, it takes a lot of hard work, and it doesn't seem to be the kind of work that a lot of our legislatures really want to get into. But that's what we're hired to do when we're voted into office, is to get into those hard issues and make hard decisions and work together to create bills that make sense for all Floridians.
And actually, that's a perfect segue into a follow-up question that I typically ask a lot of lawmakers or candidates for the Florida legislature, which is, since it is primarily Republican, it's majority Republican.
Right.
How do you propose?
The last 24 years, by the way.
Exactly.
So any issues that we have that I hear Republicans talking about, I'm going to say, well, where have you been for the last 24 years if we still have these issues today? Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry. Interrupt you.
That's true, though. But what is your strategy in terms of getting the results that you would want, in terms of the bills that you would want to sponsor and get passed? Because we've seen, a lot of Democratic lawmakers that some of the bills are actually common sense bills.
Right.
But
they don't go anywhere, right? Because we don't have the majority. So that's the simple answer would be put us in the majority and let us govern for a while and see what results we get. That's not an easy thing to do either. So when people ask me that, and they say, well, how can you get things accomplished? And I use the old the adage, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And so if we just say, well, just throw our hands up. So we can't get anything done. We're not in the majority. Too bad, so sad. We still have to advocate for our ideas. We need to put those ideas forward so voters know that there is a difference between us and Republicans. And we need to make sure that we're getting out folks to vote and that we're educating folks on the process. And then gradually, hopefully we'll get back in the majority within the session or two, and we'll see some real concrete results when that happens. But that's the only thing I can say, right? We have to work across the aisle. That's another thing that used to be common and not so common today. Both parties seem to, but again, principally the Republican side, seem to punish folks if they work across the aisle. And that's a sad commentary on politics today.
Well said. Well said. Thank you for that. We're going to take one final break, guys. And you already know how this show goes. I always kind of wrap the show up in talking to the person. Like, we talk the politics the majority of the show, but I always like to leave that last part where we get into the person. So these last couple of questions when we come back will be about Tom Keene, the man. So stay tuned after this brief break.
Catch a wave of excitement with the new Guy Harvey $500,000 Florida Cash Scratch-Off, featuring tons of cash and one-of-a-kind promotional prizes. Get yours today. The Florida Lottery. It's your ticket. Claim it.
And we are back. So in wrapping things up, you guys know I always like to ask all of our guests. Tom, just wanted to find out from you on those more difficult days. And I mean, your answer is probably going to be very easy as someone who's ex-military, but on the more difficult days, what do you usually use as your fuel to keep going? How do you stay motivated?
Sure. And I do go back to my military life for 21 years. You get up every day and you have to get things done. I think once you get into that habit, regardless of what the day brings, you're able to get up and out of bed and get going. So I really lean on my military background and history there to make things happen. So I really think character does make a difference here. And I think that's one of the reasons why I want to be able to go into the House. I think character matters, and character will matter if I get elected to House District 35.
Awesome. And then lastly, just wanted to, as we wrap up here, give our audience a chance to, open the floor for you. If there's anything that we haven't discussed yet that you want our audience to know.
Sure. So there are a couple things, but I think the main thing that I want to talk about, and it's really kind of a local issue here in Florida, but we've had these things called ghost candidates over the past 2 or 3 election cycles that have been put forward by Republicans to win elections. And they enter a candidate that doesn't have any campaign experience, doesn't have any campaign funding, doesn't do any campaigning, but they're strictly there as a ghost candidate to take votes away from Democrats. And we saw that in the district that I'm going to be running in 2 years ago, where a ghost candidate received over 6,000 votes. And the race was a very tight race. It was won by less than 1,200 votes. So clearly that's an issue that I take very seriously. And I think, here in Florida, we talk about rigged elections or fake elections, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's the primary thing that I've seen over the last 2 election cycles, and yet it's not addressed at all. So that's a subject that we'll be talking a lot about on the campaign trail this year, and making sure that voters are aware of what that means and how that impacts their vote.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Tom. It was a pleasure having you on. And ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions for Tom about his campaign, you guys want to learn more, just visit his website. You'll see it on the bottom of our screen, www.Keene for Florida. The 4 is spelled out, FORFL.com, to find out more about his campaign. He is on social media, so you can check him out on Facebook. And if I'm not mistaken, it's the exact same name. It's Keene for Florida on Facebook. Correct?
That's it.
Absolutely. So, we appreciate your time, Tom. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Mellissa.
Absolutely. And guys, that's going to do it for us on this week's edition of the FNN Politics and Power Series. Of course, we are coming to you every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Mellissa Thomas, your host. Always a pleasure to bring some of the greatest minds in politics, at least Florida politics, on the show for you guys to learn more of the political process, get educated, and in some cases, just get updated, because things are always changing, particularly during election years like this one. So the conversation will always continue. If you have someone that you want me to interview, please drop me a line. You can hit me up on FNN News at FNN News TV on Facebook, at Florida National News on Facebook, or you can also hit us up on Instagram. We're over there as well. You'll see all our social media information below. And as you see also that we run ads on our shows. So if you're someone who is looking to advertise, you're looking for a platform, be sure to drop us a line at ads@FloridaNationalNews.com to find out more and to get the conversation started. We would love to have that conversation with you. But in the meantime, guys, have a great rest of your Thursday. Thank you so much for tuning in. See you next week.